Good morning, everybody. I'm going to give our attendees about 2 to 3 more minutes to join our presentation today. We had about 60 registered, so thank you all for getting the word out, and we're about halfway there, so I'm going to give about 2 more minutes. All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chaz Jordan, Senior Consultant and Project Manager with Kessler Consulting Incorporated, based out of Tampa, Florida. With me today is Bethany Jewell, our consultant who is working with me on this project, and we will introduce our county and city representatives in just a minute. To get started, we just wanted to tell you a little bit about KCI and why we were selected for this project. We have been in business for over 32 years, and we work mainly in solid waste planning, implementation, and operations, with offices, our main office being here in Tampa, but also in Colorado, Maine, and North Carolina. We've worked with a number of cities on zero waste goals and zero waste plans, developing the strategies moving forward to attain a zero waste goal. We've even worked with SWANA, the Solid Waste Association of North America, in developing their zero waste certification course for other solid waste professionals around the country. Today, we are going to be holding a presentation to go over the various aspects of the proposed and preliminary report of the strategic plan for zero waste for Alachua County and the city of Gainesville. We're going to be going through various aspects of it and some of the overarching policies and drivers behind the development of what we've put together. Upon completion of this, we will have a Q&A session, which will be used through the Zoom tool here to hear your input and to respond accordingly and document that for review for finalizing and proposing the strategic plan to both the Alachua County Board of County Commissioners and the City of Gainesville Commission. So first, I wanted to present to you the basic usages of the Zoom platform so that you can provide input to us and the team as we go forward. You should have at the bottom of your Zoom room various controls, and this presentation slide gives you an idea of what each of those does so that you can participate and provide us input. First, this session is being recorded, and we're using this so that we can present to other stakeholders in the future the same information we're presenting today. Presenters will be the only individuals able to speak on this presentation to provide continuity and to make sure that we can get through as much and provide as much background information as possible through the hour that we have. We ask that if you can, please change your participant title under the participants button at the bottom of the Zoom presentation to add any organization that you may be representing here on the call today. The Q&A feature, which you can see next to the participants button, is where we were going to provide the input from you all to us to review and respond to during the presentation. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to go into the Q&A box, put in a question, and we will answer it during the question portion of this presentation. Now you see a polls button on there as well, but we only have one poll, and we're going to start that right now. We'd like to know what group you are representing on the call today. Now we have a number of different groups listed here. So if you could, please vote for the appropriate one so that we know who we're talking to and what organizations you represent. We'll give just a minute or two more. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And here are the results. It looks like the vast majority of you are representing community organizations, which is great. Those are the groups that can provide guidance on the grassroots efforts for zero waste. But we do have a number of folks here representing recycling processing, collection haulers, and others. And specifically, knowing Gainesville and Alachua County having a number of academic institutions, a number of you are from there as well. So thank you for being on the presentation today. You also see at the bottom of your screen the chat function. We have the ability for you all to chat with all panelists. So if you have any comments or other aspects, please put them in there, but please be aware that if you ask a question in that module, it may not be immediately answered. If you have a question regarding the zero waste plan, we highly suggest you put it in the Q&A portion if you can, so that we can respond to it appropriately through the presentation. At this time, I'd like to introduce Gus Olmos. He's the Interim Director of Alachua County Solid Waste and Resource Recovery, and Michael Heimbach, Sustainability Manager for the City of Gainesville Public Works, for some introductory comments.
Good morning, everybody. First of all, I want to thank you for taking time from your busy schedules and going to this presentation with us. This is something we've been working for a number of years, and we're pretty excited that we're getting to the step when we get to share the report with the community and get your feedback and your input before we finalize it and bring it to the county and city commissioners. I also want to add that, today we already have received a substantial amount of comments and notes and very, very constructive suggestions. So we appreciate that, and we hope to get a lot more today.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of follow up with what Gus was saying here from the city of Gainesville, that we are excited about this plan and moving forward and getting some things done here in the community as we move forward. I think if you've reviewed the plan, if you read the information, there's not a ton of stuff that's that you didn't expect, but we really want to move forward and get the input today from people to kind of drive us and give us some direction of what is really important to you.
One thing that I forgot to mention, so for those of you that are in local government or are lucky enough to be part of some sort of citizen advisory committee, you are pretty familiar with the sunshine laws and sunshine requirements. And that's one of the reasons we have this kind of control participation. We need to make sure that we don't get into any kind of sunshine violations. And that's why we're funneling all the questions to the panelists, to the QA box. So that's last thing I have to say for now.
Thank you, Gus and Mike, and we appreciate your time on the call today. So going through our presentation, we wanted to kind of give you a history of where we've been and where we're going in a few minutes. So in 2018, we were retained, Kessler Consulting Incorporated, to develop the Zero Waste Strategy Report. In 2019 and the beginning of 2020, Kessler Consulting primarily conducted an analysis of the county's current solid waste programs and infrastructure in what was called a baseline assessment, where we reviewed what is currently available and what is potentially on the horizon for Alachua County and the city of Gainesville, so that we know where the holes are, where things need to be improved, or where we need to look at focusing for strategies. This baseline analysis was completed and presented at the beginning of 2020, and it really was used to identify potential strategies that could alter the material flow in Alachua County and in the cities therein, to reduce waste going to landfills. Now, I don't know if you all are aware, but in the time since then, we've had a few big things happen, namely a pandemic. Because of that, we have been a little bit hampered in our ability to go to you all as stakeholders and get input on those strategies. So we've been working through the pandemic to develop the preliminary report, which you all found on the invitation that was sent to you, and we can provide you a link at the end. But we've come to this point where we're using this virtual meeting to really provide the input we need to finalize that report and move forward. We really wish we could be in a room with all of you and talking about these conversations and going through these things, but this is as what we have available due to the pandemic, and we really hope that you take advantage of this process today. Today, as a part of this timeline, we are presenting the findings and the formal release of the preliminary report, not the final report. And we want to get your comments so that we can develop not only the final report, but the implementation plan that is necessary for Alachua County and the city of Gainesville to effectively move forward through those strategies going forward. So we would like to hear your ideas on what needs to be added, what needs to be changed, what needs to be thought about a little bit more focused, or if there are opportunities on the horizon that may be new that we should look into. So all of those are on the table, and we're going to provide you a link at the end of this presentation where you can submit all of that information to us as well. So what's great about working with Alachua County and the city of Gainesville is you're already moving and you have a great amount of momentum towards zero waste initiatives. And the reason is because you have a number of community partners that are actively working and pushing and driving a program that hasn't been too widely used by communities across the country yet, but it is gaining a lot of momentum throughout the United States. And Alachua County and Gainesville are serving as leaders, especially here in Florida, in pushing this type of program forward. You already have political and upper management support from both jurisdictions for this type of initiative. You have a major university in the University of Florida that has initiatives, research, and is already providing outreach. You have business and civic group interest, not only from the solid waste focused haulers and material processors, but reuse programs and other areas that are essential for zero waste principles. You also have nonprofit leadership, such as the Repurpose Project and Zero Waste Gainesville, who are providing education and outreach to your citizens, businesses, and political leaders, which is essential when looking at the capabilities of local government in providing some of those services at a grassroots nature. So one overarching concept we wanted to start with in our presentation is that all waste is local. So when we look at zero waste specifically in terms of the ways that we want to implement a program, we, from Kessler Consulting standpoint and our project team standpoint, want to make sure that there are policies and programs that match the needs and capabilities of Alachua County and the city of Gainesville, not necessarily organizations or communities from other areas of the country but really focusing and making this germane to you as the communities that you serve in. Zero waste strategies are not one size fits all. Governing policies, infrastructure, capital investments, citizen interest, and their availability and knowledge base of the concepts themselves all vary very much from city to city, county to county, and community to community. So we've developed this with the intention of it being focused on Alachua County and the city of Gainesville. So the next general concept I want to present to you is the concept of a linear economy, which is what we are all used to right now. As in, we take a material, we make something with it, and then we dispose of it once we're done using it. In community zero waste, the concept is, how do we get away from just this direct economic process where we take materials and then we eventually dispose of them? And the answer is a circular economy. And this is one of the basic principles of zero waste. And what it does is it says we can make something, we use it for its purpose, but we return it back to make it usable again in some fashion, whether that be through reuse or recycling or other ways. But instead of continuously taking resources and not reusing them or not putting them back into an economic benefit, removing the need to dispose of those materials in something like a landfill. In the diagram, you can see this concept of this make, use, and return circular action. First, you'll see that there's production. That's the conversion of raw or recycled materials into usable products. Reduction is limiting the need for the use of those raw or recycled materials in the economy at the source. So at a store, at a place of business, and so on. The next part is reuse and repair, fostering the repair of those commodities so that they can be reused instead of disposed of. And then finally, recycling and composting. When commodities can no longer be reused, how can we reutilize the raw materials in some way so that they're benefiting everybody and not just being disposed of? When we look at the entire zero waste plan, the concept is to find potential strategies that meet some or all of these areas of the circular economy so that Alachua County and the city of Gainesville can continue to benefit their environment through not necessarily just disposing of materials. So our strategies in this zero waste plan are categorized in many different ways, but one of them that's really important is shown in this graph of upstream, midstream, and downstream. And the reason we utilize this is so that individuals know at what point in the product cycle, from the production at the beginning to the disposal at the end, are we impacting it and turning it towards that circular economy. So upstream strategies focus upon producer responsibility, what products they're creating and what types of manufacturing and what types of shipping materials are they using so that those materials don't need to be disposed of or potentially reused down the line. Midstream strategies are where you find reuse, repair, repurposing, donations, and food recovery, places where we don't need to make adjustments at the disposal or the collection of solid waste stage. Downstream strategies define how you recover materials after they've been discarded at the end of their use, such as recycling, composting, or other waste reduction and recovery options. Now, this graph here is a part of the SWANA Zero Waste program. It's something that we at Kessler developed many years ago, and we're utilizing this as the baseline of some of the actions that you'll see going forward in these strategies. Now, I want to take a little bit of time, and then we'll go into some more specifics in a minute on what the players of the entire community invested in zero waste and what they're really focused on. And this graph shows you the government roles that are required and then the community roles that are required and what they're really responsible for. And as you can see, that both groups are important to get that educational and that circular economy aspect really pushed out to your community, because it can't be done by just the government and it can't be done by just the community. They both need to be invested. So this kind of shows you where those different responsibilities lie. Here's some examples of government roles. Governments set the policies and programs that guide the infrastructure necessary for circular economies. They have to monitor and track success and be ready to modify strategies when necessary. But probably most importantly, they also set that standard. They lead by example in providing political and capital support for those efforts. But community roles are slightly different. They're also probably most labor intensive and most boots on the ground. A community must have businesses willing to drive innovation in the economic marketplace. So this includes collection haulers, material processors, reuse facilities, repurposing facilities, and manufacturing organizations. It must have civic and nonprofit groups not bound by politics and willing to reach out to citizens and engage them in a dialogue that's necessary to foster those behavioral changes that support a circular economy, basically by providing motivation from a peer-to-peer standpoint and the education necessary to really understand how a singular individual or a group of individuals can really impact zero waste. In Alachua County in Gainesville, you all are fortunate because you have a government and a community that are ready to address the changes in waste management that are necessary for zero waste. So let me talk a little bit more about these Alachua County and City of Gainesville responsibilities, the government roles. As stated earlier, the government plays key roles in these zero waste initiatives for the community, and they include that leveraging of the capital and political support necessary to expand infrastructure. And what I mean by that is large scale investments in potential capital projects such as a organics processing facility that will foster the ability for local organizations such as the community to really provide for, say, organics processing and collection services or compost and other types of options. Once that infrastructure is in place, they have the ability to adopt policies that improve that circularity of the economy and reduces the waste. And then they design programs that support those community-wide initiatives. Now, we really look at these three as the primary focuses of influence as we go forward in the strategy report. KCI and the project team are going to continue to focus our analysis on these areas as this strategic plan really applies to the organizations of Alachua County and the City of Gainesville and how those can continue to improve. At this time, I'd like to introduce again Bethany Jewell, who is our technical consultant on this project, and she's going to proceed further with some of the specifics within these categories that we've put into the plan. Bethany?
Thanks, Chaz. Just before we move on to the next slide, I did want to note the importance of coordinating these areas. And it's a little bit of that philosophical dilemma of like the chicken and egg, which comes first? Do you do the infrastructure? Do you put the policy first? Infrastructure needs supporting policies and programs for that return on investment. It's just critical. And on the flip side, if you adopt a new policy or implement a new program without the infrastructure, it can be meaningless for a community. So proper coordination is really critical to achieve the best results. And that is something that we have taken into consideration and will in the next phase of this report and plan. Next slide. Thank you, Chaz. So just kind of building on, well, let me back up just for a moment. In this analysis, we utilized our own tools, just as Chaz mentioned, through SWANA, and our own KCI developed tools, but we also leaned a little bit on the EPA Managing and Transforming Waste Stream Checklist tool. We utilized this because it could be something that the county and city could lean on in the future to kind of track their programming and really continue to check as they move forward with zero waste within the community. So looking at the key findings here under our categories, Infrastructure. Many of you know this already. We've received a lot of comments in this. There's few composting facilities that accept food waste. And while backyard composting and small private composters are promoted within the county and city, commercial and institutional sectors remain big material generators, and tonnage is just exceeding the processing capacity. There's also few C&D processing facilities. So again, this goes back to that chicken and egg concept. Implementing a policy or ordinance change that requires greater C&D diversion needs the available infrastructure to be successful. Another thing that we've identified is there's no large-scale reuse facility. And so if you're promoting in your outreach and education that, encouraging reuse, and whether it's dropping off or purchasing, it needs the infrastructure to support those initiatives. And as all of you know, that reprocessing of materials, it's a critical component to a circular economy. Chaz highlighted that earlier, and there's no regional material processing facility currently in place. We also identified some key policies. The establishment of a zero waste goal and associated timeline has not been adopted by the county. And this really helps to be the policy driver for zero waste within a community. And so while the material bans, they've been a part of policy changes in the county and city, there's other initiatives, setting that lead by example, like Chaz mentioned, your zero waste procurement policy for the government operations, integrating zero waste principles into the future solid waste collection and processing agreements, and ensuring necessary revisions to the solid waste ordinance that'll support food waste diversion and the reuse of materials. In programming, outreach and education programming for zero waste needs to include different material streams, material reuse, reduction of consumption behaviors, things that haven't been, oh, Chaz, is something shifting on the slides? Thank you. Also there's limited food recovery networks, and that's something programmatically the county and city can support initiatives. They can provide some outreach to the existing programs. And we also identified some recycling program improvements. I think Chaz may have mentioned this a little bit with multifamily, uniformity kind of across the recovery streams of what's an acceptable material, both residential, commercial, ensuring that processing contracts will accurately reflect those material categories. Next slide. So I wanted to include this slide just to share an important trend. If you look at the light blue bar here, this is, and notice kind of in 2019, the recycling rate was around 29%. This is a decline. This is a drop from 40% seen in 2016. We really wanted to highlight this to bring about the importance of community support and buy-in for waste reduction strategies. It's really going to be critical moving forward to reach those milestone goals. So, I know that the city has set theirs, and once the county adopts theirs, driving the policy forward, it's really community support and buy-in will be critical. Next slide. With that stated, there are many initiatives the county and city have implemented to drive waste reduction for the community. And while there are always ways to improve programming, these include the pay-it rate structures, the commercial recycling ordinance that mandates commercial recycling, educational promotion of the multiple reuse stores and facilities within the communities, having hazardous waste diversion through the Alachua County Hazardous Waste Collection Center. So multiple programs and initiatives are in place. Next slide, Chaz. The potential strategies identified through our analysis were grouped as you see here. General strategies, organics material recovery, recyclables, and C&D recovery. And this was selected to mirror that EPA checklist that I mentioned earlier. Within the preliminary report, each strategy was assessed for the pros and cons, whether it fell into the role of infrastructure, policies, or programs, and then the impact area as it relates to zero waste. And this again, Chaz went into depth on this, that upstream, midstream, and downstream concept. Next slide. So I'm not going to go into all of the general strategies. Certainly you all can find that within the report. We just wanted to highlight some of the things here. The general the general strategies address kind of that overarching policy and programmatic design for the community. It includes private sector partnerships to facilitate innovation and new technology, that large scale reuse infrastructure I mentioned earlier. Even the policies of establishing a waste reduction goal and formalizing it by adopting a zero waste resolution. They're all kind of found in this general strategies area. Next slide. So the organics material recovery really plays into how organic material flows through the county and city. Strategies here are that overarching infrastructure processing facilities, as well as those supporting policies and programs to have that coordinated approach. It also addresses midstream items like the food gleaning and the expansion of Alachua and Gainesville food pantries. Next slide. In the recyclables and recovery section, and I know we have gotten some comments about maybe breaking this out. Again, we just kind of categorize things based on that EPA checklist, but in the final report and plan, we may modify this a bit. But, items here are the infrastructure for C&D processing, a strategy addressing that uniformity between multifamily recycling so that everything, all the recycling, you're not doing one thing at your home and a different thing in a business and a different thing at a friend's house in a condo or an apartment complex, just really making it uniform. We also included areas here where the city can foster regional reprocessing facilities, textile, electronics. And this is also where we put in here the consideration of a waste to energy for those difficult to recover materials and waste streams. I know that has also been something we've received a lot of comments and feedback on, and that's been very, very helpful. And I know we'll be discussing that further in the questions and answers. Next slide. Chaz, I'll turn this back over to you now.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bethany. So in this situation, in this slide here, we ask, where do we go from here? As in, we now have a proposed set of strategies. We have a preliminary report. And I'm sure many of you want to know, okay, a preliminary report is great, but when do we get a final decision on how we move forward? So to give you some background, we are currently in the outreach and stakeholder engagement phase. And one of the things that is going to be moving forward soon is more focused meetings by Alachua County and City of Gainesville staff with particular stakeholder groups. And that's available to the groups that are on this call if requested. We'll also be doing social media outreach with public comment period going forward. And we have an online, I wouldn't say survey, it's a feedback form for you all to use to provide specific comments after actually reviewing the document. And that link is shown on your screen. If you look back at the zerowastegnv.com City of Gainesville website, you can find this there and get some more information back to us. Once we gather all of this input, especially the input we're receiving today from all of you, we will then work with the city and the county project team to develop that final report. And it will look probably quite a bit different than the one you have in front of you. As Bethany said, we may reorganize some of the strategies into a different manner that best meets the city of Gainesville and Alachua County. We may revise some of the priorities of projects. All of those things are on the table at this point to really determine what the process going forward is. Once we get to that point, we are going to prioritize those strategies in a way that provides time frames and financial impacts to those. So say the organics processing facility becomes a high important item from the stakeholders that are involved. Great. So we know that that needs to happen sooner rather than later, but the county and the city also need to know how that's going to impact them from a financial standpoint and how they could make it happen in terms of money. So we have to do all of that analysis next, once we get your input and review it and analyze it, and then we will finalize and publish that Alachua County Zero Waste Report. Once that report is finalized from the project team standpoint, it would then be presented to the Joint Water and Climate Policy Board, and then finally presented and hopefully approved by the Alachua County Board of County Commissioners and the Gainesville City Commission. So with that, that is our presentation to give you an idea of the report overall. At this time, we're going to enter that question and answer phase. Now, we have a couple of questions coming in, what I will do is I'm going to read questions aloud and ask various presenters on here, Gus, Michael, and maybe even Bethany if we want some additional information on it. The question itself, or I may even respond, and then they'll respond vocally on here. That way we can get as much information into this presentation for reuse, since it's recorded, on various media outlets later. So with that, the first question that has been posed, and I'm going to respond to it, is where exactly does the county and the city need to start? Which materials should be the priority to get out of the waste stream first from a downstream perspective? Is it residential materials or residential programming, commercial services, or do we need to look at both waste streams at the same time? So this question is really focused on the material recovery aspect of a circular economy, and is really focused on the solid waste aspects of this program. And that's great. That's something that the county and the city has fairly direct control over. Well, the response is you can start with reviewing, as both the city and the county are right now, their collection strategy to look at how can we divert more waste from landfill-oriented collection techniques to recycling, reuse, or other processing techniques that does not landfill those items. And I believe both of them already are. So it's a great place to start because it takes from the generators themselves and diverts away from disposal at the end stream. So Gus, Michael, do you have any additional comments on that?
I think you covered it perfectly.
No,
Perfect.
nothing to add.
All right, so I'm going to go to one for Michael. We had a question come in on the definition of zero waste, and in our report, we purposely were a little ambiguous on a definition because, again, we want to make it germane to the community of Alachua County and the city of Gainesville. So we wanted to hear a little bit more about that. That was the question. And is there other ways to define it out there, Michael?
Yeah, no, I think we purposely wanted to be as broad as possible and be open to any kind of reuse, recycling, or recovery technologies. I've been in this business almost 30 years. Chaz, I know you've been in it a long time too. And the waste world is constantly changing. Markets for materials go up and down. There's evolving technology. As you mentioned earlier, you always have to analyze cost. And the thing that's really bubbling up here in the city of Gainesville is your greenhouse gas emissions. And what does that activity relate to as far as greenhouse gas emissions are concerned? So, for example, we still want to send low value recyclables halfway around the world? Is that something that we really want to do, the shipping impact of that? Are there other ways to handle things more efficiently, more locally, and keep it within our community? So I think by having that broader definition of zero waste and how to get it to it and keep it local, keep the greenhouse gas emissions down is important to achieving not just a zero waste goal, but a better climate world, if you will.
All right, thank you, Michael. Another question we have here is, will this presentation be loaded on the city and county website for people to view who could not attend? The simple response to it is being recorded for dissemination again through other media, but I'll turn over to Gus or Michael on whether it will be available on the city and county websites.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be the logical place to put it. I don't see any issues with doing that. We haven't determined the exact location, but yeah, that's why we're recording it, to make it available to the public.
And we'll get it up on that zero waste GNV website.
Mm-hmm.
Another question we received is, when Commissioner Hayes Santos initially introduced his plan for zero waste by 2030, he had set that as the timeline. Is that still the timeline for the city of Gainesville?
Yeah, I think 2040 is the actual date, but we are moving quickly to implement programs here in the community. If you want to find out more, you can either tune into or check out our Zero Waste Subcommittee meetings. They're occurring about every other week, and they're on the city website.
And Chaz, I'll chime in and just clarify for them a little bit on that. I know that he had promoted, the timeline was 90% by 2030, and then the designation of a zero waste city by 2040.
Thank you both. We have a question here, very simple question. Is the GNV Chamber of Commerce part of this discussion? And yes, they were invited, and I believe they are a participant on this presentation. Here's another question. Hillsborough County has synergistically combined the yard waste and biosolids waste streams to produce high quality compost with strong demand. Are we, as in Alachua County and the city of Gainesville, considering biosolids from GRU in our plan? And Gus, I know we have some specifics on where we're taking that materials now, so I'll ask you to respond to that if you don't mind.
So we have had some meetings with the private sector, specifically a company called Life Souls. They're interested in producing a very similar product. We're working with them to find a suitable location in the county. One of the options we're kind of just starting to consider, maybe we can locate them at one of the close county landfills so we can repurpose that property, put it on a beneficial use. I know they had their own independent conversations with GRU. I'm not sure of the status of that, but the general idea is to do exactly what you mentioned, or the question mentioned, is reutilize biosolids, yard waste, organic waste, and come up with a product that is useful for the community.
All right, thank you. We have another question here. How will the focused conversations with community stakeholders proceed forward? I'm probably going to ask Gus to lead us off on this, or just because he's already begun some of these conversations with community advisory boards and committees. But I will say before he chimes in that it is not specifically scheduled. It's something that we would like community organizations to reach out to the group here, the project team, to request those so that we can figure out how to provide those to you in the best possible means. But I'll turn over to Gus if he has anything else to add.
So yeah, essentially two avenues. One, the one you just described. I mean, we have about 60 people in this meeting, and we had given presentations to other groups. So if anybody wants additional information from us, we want to be there to present this report and to get their feedback. Additionally, we're getting your contact information and your comments. So based on that, we're going to reach out if we need to clarify something, if we have questions on our end, and schedules those presentations as well. They're going to be public, open to the public, and they'll be advertised on Facebook and the regular media, just like we did for this one.
Thank you, Gus. And that goes into the next question I'll read. At what point does the citizen get involved in this planning? And the response is at every stage. So we've provided this initial feedback presentation to give an overarching concept of the plan. However, there will be these community-specific group stakeholder options that are available to all of you. At any time, you can contact either Alachua County Solid Waste or Gainesville Public Works and provide input. And this will still go through the normal policy making process. So it will be reviewed by your elected officials. And at any part of that process, you have the ability to provide input as well. The next question I have is with regards to policies related to plastic containers, plastic bags, clamshell bans, and so on and so forth in the county or with the city of Gainesville, and whether that's something that will be entertained or included in this plan. So I'll open this for Mike and Gus if there's any consideration for plastic bag bans or other types of product restrictions at that level?
I'll just start. Well, first of all, Florida state statute prohibits us from restricting the plastic bags at the retail level. We have started some discussion with regards to single-use plastics in restaurants and similar food service operations. Getting into the clamshells at grocery stores and things like that is probably a little more difficult politically and realistically, but we're going to continue to move forward, exploring our options as they become available and within reason. And people can always make that choice and can always share that information with the place that they're shopping when they make their buying decisions. And, sometimes that has more effect than any legislation.
Thank you, Gus. Did you have anything to add or?
No, I mean, I'll just echo what Mike said. Sometimes we tend to think about just putting regulations in place, and they're very useful, but sometimes consumers, they can vote with their dollars and just patronize the businesses that are doing business the way you like it done. So.
We have a question here, I believe, from one of our haulers. What specific efforts will be implemented to reduce contamination found within curbside and drop-off center recycling? I know that we do discuss in the recycling initiatives some of the concepts of programming to reduce contamination, but also to increase recycling participation at various levels. As Bethany pointed out early on in the presentation, that participation has changed quite a bit over the last 3 to 4 years, and a big portion of zero waste is increasing that participation, but doing it in a way that we can reduce contamination at the same time, making the products more valuable. Michael, Gus, anything you want to add to that?
I'll start, and Gus and I have talked about it just this week. The city of Gainesville has implemented some curbside contamination recycling efforts, patterning following the Recycling Partnership, which is a national nonprofit organization where we actually go out and look at the bins curbside. We leave tags and tell people, what they've put in there that is not part of our program. Or if they've done perfect, we leave them a door hanger and thanking them for the good job. But besides that, we're working on expanding our social media presence. We're looking to work with the county on that as we move forward over the next few years. We want to build out that Zero Waste Gainesville, zerowastegNV.com website. So we are doing things to improve recycling. We're also looking at standardizing the multifamily recycling. So we think that's going to be very successful in improving that recycling stream.
Thank you. The next question is, if there were a cost-effective non-incineration technology which could process and then recycle carbon-containing materials such as wood, plastics, etc., that could be provided for Alachua County or the city, is that something that they would embrace? And what are the steps that would need to be taken to move forward on that?
So right now we are not, approving or rejecting any specific project. We're in the process of getting the plan developed. The plan will have recommendations, and then the plan will become one of the guiding documents that we use to evaluate projects as they come in front of the county and city commission. Just to go back to the contamination question, just because I got these numbers in my head right now. So at the county level, and this is residential and commercial, our contamination rate is slightly below 13%. That is a really good number if you compare it with other communities. And it has to do a lot with the fact that we have a dual stream system. And actually, if you remove the commercial part of the contamination rate, we drop off to about 5 to 6%. So our citizens are doing a great job. Of course, we can always do better. And one of the parts that we really need to do better is in the multifamily. That's lumped with the commercial number, and that's kind of driving that contamination rate higher than it needs to be. So that's something we're going to be working on.
Awesome. Thanks, Gus. Got two more questions that have come in. The first one is, on the policy level, are we considering how the recycling plan could impact ordinances? For example, how locally produced compost would impact the soil amendment ordinance that Alachua County is currently considering. And that one I think will be for Gus.
Yeah, so the idea is to have a holistic approach. So yeah, the county is kind of looking at a soil amendment ordinance to help with nutrient reduction and irrigation needs. But to make that feasible, you need to have a local source of good soil amendment. So we're going back to that that project about having locally produced composted material. So yeah, we're hoping to marry those two together.
Outstanding, thank you. Next one is, there seems to be a lot of focus on recovery by the individual and the community. And this person says, that's great. But where's the discussion with big box retail stores and companies in terms of changing production systems to benefit our goal of a circular economy? And that's a great question. And let me start with some of the things that Bethany spoke about first. Is, as we were going through the strategy development process, there was a chicken and the egg kind of concept of, okay, what do we start with? Is it this type of process, or is it really on the recovery and the infrastructure end? And we found that a lot of it directly applies to what happens with the material if we were to work with big box retailers now on changing some of their processes. So a lot of this is focused, going back to my part of the presentation, on the government roles, on that infrastructure policies and programs. Now, that doesn't mean that in this process, in the plan itself, we do go into working as a community with those retailers and providing other aspects of things like incentives and so on and so forth that will help with that process. So it is included in this plan. However, when we look at it from a government standpoint, from the organizations of Alachua County and the city of Gainesville, we definitely as a project team wanted to focus on where they could really help. And that was in that infrastructure side of things, which predominantly focuses on downstream and recovery options. Gus, Michael, do you have anything to add to that?
Right, just that some of our abilities are limited, people going to buy TVs, there's going to be styrofoam in there.
Okay. The next question is, I'm just checking my time here. Okay, we have time for about 2 to 3 more questions. The next one is, if the focus in Gainesville or Alachua County for zero waste is reducing greenhouse gas emissions, why is there such an emphasis on incineration rather than reuse in this report? I will say that both are actually provided in this report. In fact, I would say reuse is more heavily emphasized than incineration. Incineration is included as a potential strategy, basically because of the fact that there are limited other infrastructure and recovery options available right now. But I'd welcome more input from Gus and Michael.
Yes, like I said, like we said at the beginning, we wanted the draft strategies report to be as inclusive as possible. So we didn't want to, at the staff level, just limit any kind of applicable technology. That's why we're getting the input from the community, and we'll make a decision that definition that fits the city of Gainesville and Alachua County.
I agree.
We'll do 2 more questions. The first one is, it just came in. Have there been any discussions with apartment complexes meant for students? Being a graduate student, I've noticed that in many of these complexes, there are not enough recycling dumpsters compared to the population in the complexes. Additionally, on these dumpsters, there is no signage, such as not throwing away your recyclables in plastic bags. So this goes directly to the multifamily recycling you both talked about. So if you'd like to add anything to it in regards to this question, please do.
We're actually drafting some ordinances that address that. We're very aware of that. And I know the UF Sustainability Office, that's like their #1 complaint that they get is off-campus recycling. So we're looking to address it both through ordinance and through contracts coming up over the next year or so.
And then the last question I'll read before we close out is, what types of funding is currently available to implement these projects and all of these different items and strategies that are in the plan? You know, when it comes down to it with regards to a number of these, where is the money coming from, basically? And Gus or Mike, if you would like to answer that, please do.
So I'll take the first stab at it. So depending on the specific strategy, you know, some of these things, the county and the city, we're already doing. We just need to do more of it. So we do have some flexibility in our existing budget to reallocate priorities. Once we start talking about bigger, more costly projects, yeah, at least at the county level, we don't have any allocated funding for this. As the projects move through the process and they get selected, then we're going to have to start looking at funding sources and looking at private-public partnerships. But at this moment, you know, we can deal with the smaller scale projects, but the bigger ones, we're going to have to find additional funding sources.
Yeah, I concur, and I appreciate the question. I think we don't often state enough that doing these things is more expensive than just throwing it in a hole, you know, up the road. So, you know, we want to be cost efficient and effective, but these things often do cost some more money. But I think through volume and well thought out programs, we can do it with financing that's out there and easily attainable.
And I'll close this out by, you know, this plan is one of the guiding instruments that both the county and the city wants to use going forward in determining what projects and when to fund them. So again, going back to the next steps beyond this meeting, one of the aspects of this is for especially the infrastructure, large scale infrastructure capital projects. Kessler Consulting will be reviewing some of the basic financial data necessary to really pro forma out those types of projects for, you know, Gus and Mike and the county and the city's staff to determine how and when those can be funded and how that funding will occur. So that is a big next step of this process once we determine what the prioritized strategies are. With that, we are, I think, 1 minute away from 1 hour, which is fantastic. We, from the project team standpoint, very much appreciate everyone who took the time out of their day to be a part of this call. We know that it was a little bit restrictive based upon the needs of you know, all of the factors involved. But we really appreciate the time you took out, and we really hope that you feel comfortable providing more input. We've received some very, very constructive feedback. We really hope you go to the stakeholder feedback form that we provided to you in the invitation. And we'd like to hear from you. Just because this is a preliminary report does not mean that it is the final report. And we'd like to know what else you think we should be focusing on from a county and city standpoint. We appreciate all you do for Alachua County and the city of Gainesville. Our contact information, both mine and Bethany's, are up on your screen. If you would like to send any additional information, any additional questions, we'd be happy to answer them. And we really appreciate your time today. With that, this is the end of our webinar, and we hope to hear back from you soon. Thank you for being here.